Good evening, everybody. Oh man, y'all got really quiet. Glad to have everybody here. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to recap just a little bit more about our trip. I wanted to actually give you the opportunity to ask questions, which you didn't really get the opportunity last time. So if there's anything in particular you want to ask, I'll do my best to answer it. Remember, Carolyn and I are not experts on Zambia, but we can do our best to give you some sort of answer. Next week, John Prater, the man who put the trip together, the guy who's the regional supervisor, and really the guy who's over Zambia for Gospel Link, is coming, and he's going to help answer specific questions you may have about how we can get involved, what we can do to help, what they need. I told one person earlier this week, I don't want to just throw money at an issue. I want to be part of something, and I want to try and help come up with a solution, a long-lasting solution. So just real quick, though, there's three main ways you can get involved with Gospel Link. You can sponsor a pastor. It's $250 a month, and that will basically completely cover his salary. Gospel Link only sponsors a pastor for 3 years. The goal is we sponsor you for 3 years. We'll get you whatever training you need, and then you need to learn to be self-sufficient in that 3 years. And that is a beautiful way to do ministry because then that enables them to take that money and go help another young pastor start a church. Go help another young church get started. So you can sponsor a pastor. You can give money. If you're just saying, hey, Aaron, I want to give a one-time gift to get Bibles to help a pastor, you can do that. Or there can be more of an ongoing relationship between us and Gospel Link as a church. But we'll talk more specifically about that next week. Real quick, if you grabbed a prayer list when you came in, that's good. If you didn't, I'm just going to go over this real quickly. First thing I want to mention is that Carissa Holmes lost her grandmother, Kathleen Moody Holman, a couple days ago. And so just pray for the Holmes as you have opportunity and as you think about them. She was 99 years old. So what a blessing that is that Carissa had her grandmother that long. That's an awesome thing. And then continue to pray for Candy and Rebecca as they continue to go through treatments. We want to remember Buddy Morgan. He's home. But he is still getting stronger, so just pray for him. And thinking through, remember Nancy Gillum at the hospital and Curtis Tootin are both at Edgefield Hospital. I don't have any other major updates. Does anybody else have any big updates? All right, let me open us in prayer. Father, we just thank you so much for the privilege of worshiping you and knowing you. And God, I thank you once again for providing everything that Carolyn and I needed to go on this trip, and for the other ladies and John. And God, we just thank you for the privilege of going and being your ambassadors. And Father, I pray right now that you'd prompt us to be ambassadors in Edgefield, that we wouldn't have to fly 8,700 miles to make much of you, but that we would do that right here where we are as well. Father, we just pray for wisdom for this church, that we would continue to be a light to our community. We thank you for all the people we've had the opportunity to love on over the years. And Father, we pray that we would continue to be your instruments. Lord, we lift up those who are sick and hurting. God, we continue to pray for Candy and Rebecca as they go through treatments. We lift up Carissa as she grieves over the loss of her grandmother. And Lord, we lift up Curtis and Nancy as they both recover at the hospital. And pray you'd give Buddy strength and Elsie as they recuperate at home. Lord, we love you. We thank you for today and ask you to watch over us. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. So real quick, some of you weren't here last week. The live stream got messed up last week, and so I just want to do a real quick recap of the trip. If you remember, Zambia is huge. It's the size of Texas. Population is not that big, though, so it's very sparsely populated. We were, and I had this last week, and I didn't have my laser pointer with me. We flew into Livingstone right here, this little red dot, and we drove here. So this is the extent of Zambia that Carolyn and I have seen, right? We were there for 2 weeks, and that's what we covered. The majority of our time was spent in this little city of Choma. Most of the people in this region speak Tonga, which is what we were able to buy Bibles in. But again, you can go one community over, and they're speaking a completely different language. I drove, and this is on the wrong side. They kept saying, how do you feel about driving on the right side? And I said, no, this is the wrong side. This is not the right side. I only made Carolyn and all our friends scream one time. Witch doctors are a common problem there. There are witches who cast curses on people, and there are witch doctors who will cure you from those curses. They use a lot of natural remedies. So if you go in and say, I've been cursed, my stomach hurts, they're going to go and make some herbal tea right out of their garden, and they're going to tell you they've healed you with their power. Well, they've just used some herbal tea, but of course they're never going to tell you that because they want you to be beholden to them. So this is a common sight, and it's something they're still dealing with even today. I had the privilege to lead worship for a pastor's conference. While I was leading worship and then lecturing, Carolyn and the other ladies were working with some of the pastors' wives, just encouraging them, loving them, giving them some resources, giving them some goodie bags. After we finished with the pastor's conference, we went to a few schools. This is John cutting up with a bunch of the kids, and they absolutely loved it. I could gather a crowd just by pulling my guitar out, and they would gather around just to listen to us. And so John's learned a song in their language, and him and Pastor Fabian are singing. And all of these school activities, Carolyn is the hit everywhere she went. All the kids wanted to touch her hair. They just wanted to take a picture with me. They didn't think I was special. They just wanted to be in the picture. But every one of these kids, we had the opportunity to go in, share the gospel with them, encourage them, ask them if they have any questions, and then their contact information's going to these local pastors. So all of these kids are getting follow-up. This was probably the coolest experience for me, so I'm kind of going into favorite memories right now. One of the kids, I guess they stared at Carolyn for about 20 minutes, and I guess they got bored. So they came over to my side, and they're staring at me. And one of the boys goes, "Will you play with us?" And I said, "Sure. What do you want to play?" And he said, "Football." And I was like, "Let's go. Go get the ball." Well, they didn't have a ball. They had a bunch of plastic bags they'd wadded up to make a soccer ball. That's what these kids are playing with. But I mean, now they're happy as they can be. Well, so I get out there, and there's probably 300 kids there. There's no way I'm trying to play soccer with 300 kids. I would have crushed some child. So one of them says, "Do you want to run?" And I said, "You think you can beat me?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "It's on." And we took off running. I mean, it was 5 minutes. But when I finished, I came back, and all the kids just circled around me. And I didn't speak their language, and they didn't speak mine. But it was just such a cool experience and moment where I was just able to have fun with these kids. And we would go back to this school, and the pastors would have a better opportunity to speak to them. Once again, we had the opportunity to preach at the schools, to share the gospel. These kids all wanted Bibles, and we talked about that last week. We did not have enough for every child to have one, but the hope is that we'll have more resources to send in the future. We went back and gave those schools soccer balls. Every school we went to, we went back and took 2 soccer balls and air pumps, because and it was neat because in their culture is very much an honor culture. And so I handed the principal the soccer balls and the air pumps we bought, and he goes, no, take these back. We're going to go out, and I want all the children to watch you give these to me. And so we went back out, and he gathered all 200, 300 kids around, and he said, "They are giving us something," and I handed it to him, and he said, "These are a gift, and we're going to take care of them." I mean, it was a neat experience. John had the opportunity to meet the headmaster of one of these schools and to pray with him. It was not this, it was one of the other pastors, actually grew up at this boarding school. So that was a cool thing. But this is the headmaster here. John got to pray with him. That's an open door. We go back there and we say, "Hey, we're Gospel Link, the ones who came and prayed, the ones who led worship." And so that opens a door for Fabian, who is trying to plant churches all over this region. This is his grandson, and this is the national director, Bitwell, that we worked with while we were there. This is New Jerusalem. We went throughout. I just took a picture. It's gorgeous. And I couldn't take a picture without the children getting in it because they wanted me to take their picture. Then had some more pictures here. Hang on a second. Yep. Pastor Fabian preaches to the kids. We showed the Jesus film. John preached and shared the gospel. I preached and shared the gospel one night. Carolyn and the other ladies on the trip made these Jesus bracelets, and that's something we'll talk about when we talk about evangelism. I think we're doing the last 2 weeks in September, the last 2 Sunday nights, but I'll have more information about that. But just walking the kids through the story of salvation with those was such a cool thing. And all the kids wanted a bracelet. We gave out Bibles. All these grandkids are going to get to hear the scripture. The head man and his family got a Bible. Once again, the children loved Carolyn. They only loved me when I brought cookies. I brought cookies, and they swarmed me, and I was like, oh, this might have been a bad idea. But we were able to give them all out. That's another just really neat experience. Here's the church we went to one of the Sundays. Simple little structure, metal roof, sticks. You can tell, I mean, it's sticks holding up the metal roof here. This is recycled metal roof. So a building fell down somewhere, and they said, hey, let's take those and build a church out of it. The choir was phenomenal. Not as good as our choir, but they were good. They get up, no rehearsal, and just start singing these beautiful songs and all these harmony parts. Carolyn did an awesome job sharing the gospel with these people. The next day we went and we did an eyeglass ministry, over 800 eyeglasses given out, reading glasses. Let me be clear, we're not eye doctors, we can't give out actual eyeglasses, but these are reading glasses. And to see the smiles on these people's faces, and Pastor Fabian, guess what he's doing right there? He's sharing the gospel. And then over here, let's see, Simone Zay. Here's Simone Zay. Guess what he's doing? He's sharing the gospel and inviting people to church. And let's see, we got another pastor. Here's Webster, who is my translator most of the time. He's sharing the gospel with somebody over here. And so it's just a really neat experience to gather the crowd and then let them do what they do. They don't need me to preach in Zambia. They have pastors who can preach. They don't need me to share the gospel. I'm simply a tool there to try and help them and provide a spark. This is one of the guys that was just overjoyed. Hadn't been able to read in a long time, and now he could. And by the way, the last day, Pastor Fabian goes, hey, wait, let's gather everybody up before we start giving out eyeglasses. And I said, okay, what for? Guess what he's doing here? He's sharing the gospel. Captive audience for 10, 15 minutes. Hey, before you get glasses, you got to come and talk to me for a few minutes. And he shares the gospel with them. It was cool. It was really cool. This is Pastor Fidelis, who Carolyn and I went and ate with his family. His wife has a little garden, has a little store. This is how Fidelis makes money. He runs a little booth where he exchanges money using cell phone. It's a weird way they do banking. But he exchanges money for people, does withdrawals. And so he's got a bunch of cash in there. I asked him, have you ever had an issue? And he said, no, nobody's ever bothered me. But that's how he's supporting his family. And I looked at him and I said, you've got a year and a half of support left. He's halfway through. I said, what are you going to do when the support's out? He said, I've got to get a second booth going. And the last day I saw him, I said, how'd it go? And he said, I finally got my approval from another vendor to open another booth. So he's well on his way to becoming self-sufficient. And that's what we want. That's just the coolest picture I took in Zambia. I mean, that girl is just precious. Has nothing to do with the presentation. They just have a really cute daughter. And these are all the pastors we worked with. We've got Fabian, we've got Bitwell, Simonze, Webster, Fidelis, and Joseph. There you go, Pastor Joseph. He's the poor guy who had to try and translate from Revelation for me while I was preaching. I was like, I'm so sorry I picked Revelation. I don't know why I picked that passage. But it was an awesome trip. Lifelong relationships were built. Pastor Bitwell's already sent me a picture of all the Bibles. I shared that on Sunday. This is what a mission trip should look like. Not always. So some trips do medical missions. They'll go and give out medicine, but the goal is not to give out medicine. What's the goal? To share the gospel. Yeah, you're going to get to talk to our doctor, but we're going to be out here playing with your kids, playing soccer or whatever, sharing the gospel with these kids. What questions do y'all have? In a few minutes, Carolyn and I will go into our favorite memories, but what questions do you have specifically? Anything?
How well all of the kids were.
Oh my gosh.
What about the crime rate within the country?
Okay, so the crime rate in Zambia is, for some things it's higher than the U.S., some things it's lower. The main issue they will tell you they struggle with is theft. So there was a story of a guy who went to one of the hotels like we did, and he left his window open that night because it was nice. Well, there's bars in the window, so you don't have to worry about anybody getting in. But he woke up the next morning and his pants were gone. Someone had taken a stick and reached through the window, picked up his pants, took his wallet, took all the money out, left his wallet. They were kind enough to leave his wallet, took the money out. And so that's the kind of stuff they deal with. Pastor Fidelis keeps his motorcycle in his kitchen. I walked in and I went, that's an odd piece of furniture. He goes, if I leave it outside, they will pick it up and walk away with it. So petty theft is the main thing they deal with. I never felt uncomfortable. I told Catherine I'll take the family back one day. Like, didn't bother me a bit, and they would feel comfortable. The ladies we were with, Carolyn, you felt comfortable? There were a couple times in a market where you're getting crowded in by a bunch of people. I got a little claustrophobic because none of us are speaking the same language, but it was fine. And the kids aren't in here so I can talk about it. The kids were so obedient and so respectful. It was astounding. These teachers will have like 50 students in a class, and the kids listen. I mean, it was incredible. But I think Zambia values children. The United States does not. We murder children. They value children. And I think that's the difference. I mean, even in like public life, they don't shun the kids. The kids are expected to be out there with them. They're expected to be talking. They're part of the family. And so it was a really powerful experience in that regard. Kids were all sweet. You could tell they wanted to ask me questions that they didn't feel comfortable asking. They're like, oh, they'd get shy, but it was a really good experience. Did I answer your question, James Earl? Somebody else had a question? Yeah, most of your teachers are female. I noticed most of the headmasters are male. The women are very much expected to handle all of the domestic chores, and men are expected to not help with any of it. And so I looked at Fidelis, because he's 30 years old, so we're about the same age. And I looked at him and I was like, you help your wife with the house, right? He goes, yeah, I do. And I said, but you can't carry your baby outside. And he goes, oh no. He said, if I put the strap on and carried my daughter out, people would think there was something wrong in our marriage. So he very much still has to respect lines, but he does his best. He said, I help cook, I help clean, I help take care of my daughter. But it's very much still a patriarchal society. In fact, I was told if you don't have a child within the first year of your marriage, everybody starts wondering if there's something wrong in your marriage, because that's the woman's role, to have children and to take care of the home. And if you don't have children, it's very much what we see in Scripture, especially in the Old Testament, where there's this shame and dishonor if you haven't had a child. And of course, we don't believe that, but that's what their culture views. So, yes, sir.
What's the main driver? I think you said before that the average age was 16. What's the main driver of that?
HIV and AIDS is a major portion of that. If you look at the numbers, and I don't remember exactly, these are ballparks, but it's like for everyone, the average rate of HIV and AIDS among people over the age of 40 is like 30%. I mean, it's high. But then you look at the little kid, 15 and under, it's like 4%. So they're heading in the right direction. They have gotten a handle on that. They're talking about prevention and all those things. The other thing is they allow their children to live. I mean, all their babies are being born. If you're not getting rid of any of them, I mean, what would the population of the U.S. look like if Roe v. Wade had never happened? It'd be a lot bigger than it is now. I think those are probably the two big things. They also like big families. I mean, Pastor Webster, how many kids did Webster have? 9 kids. 9 kids, like 27 grandkids. There were kids everywhere when we went to his house. It was beautiful. Somebody else. Yes, sir.
See in the pictures, everybody's smiling and look happy, but did you feel like you're in the midst of extreme poverty?
So that's one I've kind of wrestled with, because it's extreme poverty the way we would define it, but they don't know any differently. And so most of the people are happy. And I'll tell you why I say that. John, I think it was John, asked Pastor Fabian, hey, we're looking for a good meal, a good restaurant to go to tonight. Where would you recommend? And he goes, oh, I don't know. They're all so expensive. And John said, well, where do you take your wife if you want to have a nice meal? And he goes, oh, we've never done that. He's in his, how old's Fabian, Carolyn? Yeah, he's 50, 60 years old, never taken his wife out to eat. And he didn't say it like, well, we've never been able to do that. He goes, oh, no, we don't do that. Like, it's just a way of life for them. I will say a couple of the ladies on our group gave him money and said, we would like just to bless you with this. If you want to take your wife out to a meal, we just wanted to do this for you. So, yes, it is extreme poverty, but everybody was content in a way. There wasn't this, well, when you get so much money in your bank account, what do you think? What's the first thought that goes through your head when you hit that threshold? What can I spend it on? Or what's the next threshold? What's the next thing I need to save up for? They don't have enough money to even think about that. So, Carolyn, do you want to add anything to that? Did you?
I kind of agree with what you said.
Yeah.
They don't know any different.
Yeah.
Especially the children, that's all they know. And so they're just as content and happy, to live like they're living.
Yeah.
But I'm sure the adults would love to have electricity.
Oh, sure.
Running water, in their homes and a workable bathroom, but they make it work.
Sure.
They are.
Yeah. Yeah, they make it work. There was one child who was pushing a toy through the parking lot, and he conveniently stopped his toy behind our van. Well, I knew what that meant. He's going to come to the door and he's going to ask for money. Well, he came to Bitwell's side, and he said, I need money for books for school, and Bitwell said, here. He said, how much is it? And he said, 2 kwacha. That's like 10 cents. And Bitwell goes, here. And he hands him a 5, and the kid runs off happy. Well, as I'm driving out of the parking lot, I said, what were they playing with? And I turn around. They've taken some old, looked like hand-carved wooden wheels and some pieces of wire, and they've made a little push toy. And that's what the kids play with, and they're happy with that. So it was just a very different culture. I'm trying to think if I ever felt overcome by the amount of poverty. Carolyn, was there ever a time where you were upset over the poverty that you saw, or anything that you really felt uncomfortable with? You can think about it for a minute. You don't necessarily have to give me an answer right now, but just ponder that. Yes, ma'am.
Even though it's extreme poverty, what about food? Are they lacking for food, or they have what they need?
Most of them have, most of the people we encountered, including out in New Jerusalem, have what they need. The government subsidizes corn because corn is in every dish. If you don't like corn, or if you're allergic to corn, do not go to Zambia. They eat it every day in everything they eat. So the government subsidizes that, so they're able to buy that a little bit cheaper. But I will note that I would meet children who were my son's age, and they're like a foot shorter than him, or 6 inches shorter than him. And that was pretty regular experience, especially out in the bush. So you immediately recognize there's malnourishment. Corn does not have all the nutrients you need. Corn is wonderful, but you can't have that as your main staple. But they care for one another. They take care of their neighbors. And out in the villages, it's very much, I've got extra, you got extra of that, let's share. And so they seem to take care of each other pretty well. Yes, ma'am. Most of it's government subsidized. It's like they have in Europe. It's socialized medicine. And so they don't go. If you're deathly ill, you can go to a hospital. If you have money, you go to a private hospital, which is the same thing I ran into in South America. Everybody says, don't go to the public hospitals, go to the private hospital. But none of the people I worked with could afford the private hospital. So you just don't get sick. And if you do, you pray you get better. Medicine's a little bit easier to come by, though. So if you know what you need, you can go to the local pharmacy and say, I need this, and they'll sell it to you. But we had people coming in for eyeglass prescriptions, and it would be $100 US for their prescription to get filled. There's no way they're ever going to be able to afford that. Yes, ma'am.
Earlier you said you could tell the kids would want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
And they would get shot. Did any of them actually ask you something awesome that you remember, and maybe even was funny, or was like, oh, I never would have thought they would be curious about that, or Carolyn, maybe I don't know if you have a funny story or a question
Sure.
you want to ask, because obviously the kids like you more than they
Yes, they definitely did. One kid asked me about my family, and so I pulled out a picture of my family and I walked around the room. So that was a neat memory. You got anything, Carolyn? You're welcome to come up here if you got one to share. Yeah, come on. I got a microphone too. And you got to use it. The people online won't hear you.
So yes, I had the kids ask me questions, especially during time when I was sharing the gospel with them, and it was just them and me. And they would ask about the family, and then they'd ask, "How did you get here?" You know, and of course we told them we flew on a plane and how far it was, and so they, you know, asked those kind of questions. They didn't ever ask about how much it costs or how much money do you have or anything like that. It was always more personal. I know one little story that I thought was funny was when I was sharing with a group of a little older kids. I guess they were 10 to 14, somewhere around there, in one of the classrooms. And I wanted to know each of them's name. And so I would go to each one and ask them, "What's your name?" And they would tell me, and they were common names. There weren't anything really hard, but they talked so low and they'd tell me your name, you know, like that. And so I'd be like, "Say it again," and then I'd repeat it, and everybody in the room would bust out laughing. Because you can imagine me saying their name, even if it's Christine, you know. They say, their name was Christine, I say, "Christine."
Oh, that's one of my favorite memories. We went into a restaurant. She knows who I'm going to share. Hang on.
We went into a fast food restaurant, and Carolyn goes, "I reckon y'all don't have any ketchup." Mayonnaise. "I reckon y'all don't have any mayonnaise." John lost it. He was like, "Could you have said that any better?" Like, that was. They did have mayonnaise, that's right, yeah, they did.
It just wasn't Duke's.
Go ahead, Angel.
Well, I know y'all talked about, I guess you have to walk a couple miles or something to go to school. So like, what does that look like? Do they leave really early in the morning? Is it a longer day? How, I mean, just all of that.
So I took the picture of the school out of here, but most of the schools were just a few classrooms. And one of the schools we went to, they said they had over 1,000 students. Well, there was like 5 classrooms, so I'm sitting there going, where do 1,000 kids go? They have 2 and 3, depending, sessions. So kind of like we used to do with kindergarten. When I was a kid, you had half-day kindergarten. That's how they have to run all their schools. So they'll have, morning and then afternoon and then evening in some cases. And they had adult learners at one school that would come in to work on English or whatever in the evening. So that's the way they rotate through to make sure everybody has a chance to go to school. Did I answer your question? Okay, go ahead.
Religion, is it freedom of religion? Is all, okay.
We were 100% clear. Zambia's president, 2 presidents ago, said we're a Christian nation. That doesn't mean everybody in the country understands the gospel, but it means that it's an open and free country that we can walk around and share the gospel with whoever we want.
Is all
No, well, no. There's some places you can get persecuted, but Zambia is open. Good question. Yes, ma'am.
So kind of going back to what Angel was saying, then having to walk, so far to go to school, do the kids have everything they need as far as shoes and stuff like that to protect their feet and stuff when they're walking so much?
No, I saw a lot of children that didn't have shoes. And the ones that did, they were usually flip-flops that looked like they were about 20 years old, or worn-out shoes that they've worn, probably passed down from their siblings. So you did not see anybody with a nice pair of sneakers or anything like that. So, and all their clothes looked like they were hand-me-downs and nothing matched. You know, they just put on whatever they had. And so, in that respect, no. And another story I'll share is when we were at one of the schools doing the eyeglasses, I was handing them the glasses that they needed, and there was 2 windows right there where the table was. And the kids would come up to that window watching what I was doing.
Staring at Carolyn's hair.
And so there was one little girl out there, and she had her pencil, and she was trying to sharpen it with a knife. And she's sitting there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was worried. She was young. I was like, she's going to cut herself. And so we had little pencil packs that had the little handheld sharpeners. And so I got one out of the pencil pack, and I asked her, I said, can I hold your pencil? And she brought it to me, and I sat there and sharpened it. And she was like, you know. And so I gave her her pencil back and I gave her the sharpener. I said, take this and don't use the knife anymore. And so that, you know, that's just all they have, so they use what they have.
Yeah.
And is there a way, I mean, I know there are a lot of other areas that need help in that aspect as far as like shoes and clothing and all. But would we go through Gospel Link for that stuff too, or?
Probably not. And the reason I say that is the first 3 days I was there, I wanted to give everyone money, right? I wanted to help everyone. But then I backed up, and I think I said this last week, there's over 1 billion people in Africa. I can't help all of them. But what I can do is pick the one thing that I can do the best and give them that. And then help them learn to be self-sufficient in that thing. So Gospel Link's goal is to plant churches. So that when we're gone, and I think Becky Turner put this the best. I was visiting with Becky Turner yesterday. She said, an ember only burns so long by itself. But if you can put a bunch of embers together, they can start a pretty good fire. And that's what we're going for with this. We go in, we plant churches, we help Gospel Link, who helps these pastors, you know, to start getting into school supplies and stuff. That would be another ministry, because Gospel Link's not doing anything like that.
I'll share another story. On the last Sunday that we were there, we went to a church plant that they're trying to start in this village when we were in Livingstone. And so we rode and rode and rode, and I didn't think we'd ever get to where
And
we
I
were
was driving,
going.
so we're all sick.
And it's on bumpy dirt roads, you know, and through villages trying to get, and we came up to a village. I thought, oh, this must be where well, no, we went through that village and we kept going on and on and on. And finally, we came to this big, really beautiful tree. And that's where we stopped. And the church was held under that tree. And we were standing around waiting on things to get set up. And I looked behind me, and there was a teenager boy, probably 15, 16. And he was pushing this wagon up the road. And I'm like, you know, he looked like he was really struggling, and he was trying to get it up the road. And as he got closer, I realized there was a person laying on that wagon, and it was an older gentleman who had no legs, and I don't think he had arms either. I didn't see any. Yeah. And he couldn't speak very well. But he had pushed him from their house, wherever that was, because I don't know how far he pushed him, all the way up to that tree so he could be there for the service. And I thought, how many of our teenage boys would take the time?
How many of our adults?
Yeah, even an adult to
yeah.
push that wagon through on those dirt roads up to where we were having church. And, you know, it was just a beautiful thing to see. It really was.
They're excited and eager to hear the Bible.
Yes.
They're owning that church. This is our town. This is our church plant. We're going to be there and we're going to support it. So it was a really encouraging thing to watch. Any other questions? Yes, Miss Sigrid.
Is it possible to send more Bibles?
Yeah, so that's one of the options I had mentioned, is that we simply raise, let's say we raise $10,000. We take that $10,000 and give it to Gospel Link and say, Bibles and whatever else you need, and then they send it to Bitwill and he gets what he needs. So there's options for ongoing donations, there's options for a one-time donation, but I think we'll address a lot of that next week when John's here.
I know one thing that I put upon my heart to do after we visited with Fidelis and his wife and their little girl. We were talking to him, and I asked him, you know, she's like 2.5, and I said, when do they start school? And she said she'll start the next session when she turns 3. So I think it's January when she'll start. And I said, well, where will she go to school? And she said, well, we found a school that we want to send her to. It's a private school. And I said, well, how much does that cost, you know, to send her to that school? And she said it's about 500 kwacha a quarter, and I think there's 3 quarters in their school year. And so that comes up to be about $50.
$58.
$58 a semester for her. So
No, that's for the whole year. That's for 3.
oh, that's for the whole, okay.
Yeah.
So that's what it costs to send that little girl to school. Well, 500 kwacha to them is probably a month or more worth of income. So I decided myself, and Mark didn't know it till I got home, but that
I
we're,
think Mark's okay with $58.
yeah, he said he's okay with it. But we're going to support her through Gospel Link to send her to school. So I'm excited about that because she was just a precious little girl, and all she did the
That's the
whole
one
time.
I had the picture of.
Yeah, all she did the whole time was stare at me. She just.
Her
she
dad
would- she
put her
would
down to
talk,
walk by
yeah.
us, and she just
She-
looked at us
yeah.
like, I don't think so,
She
Dad.
didn't want to walk by us, especially Erin. She didn't want to go by him at all.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Just saying.
She's right. She's right. Yeah, go ahead.
What grade do they go to?
What?
Do they go to like the 12th grade?
Yeah, yeah. So their school system is kind of set up the way ours is. They break it down a little bit differently with primary, secondary, all that stuff. It's more of a British education style. But yeah, they go through until that age. But the problem is, I mean, we met one girl who was like 21 and had to go back and finish. She hadn't finished her last 2 years of high school. So because she had to work, she had to help support her family.
And she had a son.
And she had a son, so now she's having to go back to school. So, but yeah, they have fairly similar education.
Where do they work? Which kind of jobs do they have?
Okay, so in New Jerusalem, they're scavenging, they're finding day labor, they're going out and hanging out in town, just hoping they can catch somebody giving out jobs for the day. They're picking up cardboard, they're picking up plastic bottles, they're doing anything they can to scrounge. They farm. In the cities, I mean, there's companies. There's just like we might have. In the middle of Choma, there's businesses, there's hotels, there's hospitals, there's schools, and you can get jobs at those places. They don't pay nearly what we pay. I asked Bitwell, I said, what does vacation look like in Zambia? And he goes, we don't really get that. And I said, nobody? And he said, oh yeah, no, sure. Doctors and lawyers, they get vacations. I said, so what happens to the average person? He said, you don't get paid. If you don't work, you don't get paid. And I said, so nobody takes vacations? And he goes, not really, not among the
And they
general.
have no retirement.
No retirement. I said, so what happens? He said, you work until you die. I said, oh.
And that's one reason they value their children, because they expect the children to take care of them in their older age. So the more kids they have, the more opportunities they have to pass them around and take care of them. I guess.
Maybe one of them will take
Yeah,
care of us. Go ahead, Angel. I think it's similar to the U.S. all over the map. I mean, there were a lot of young moms, same we have here, but there's also Fidelis is 30, and how old was his wife? 26? I think she was 26 or so, and they just had that little girl who's like a year and a half old, or 2 years, 2.5, sorry. So, you know, all over the place. Yeah, so you have to have a dowry. So so let's use my example. If I wanted to marry Catherine and we were living in Zambia, I would have to go to her father and say, I'd like to marry your daughter, and he's going to set the dowry price. Here's how much you have to pay me for my daughter's. There's two reasons for a dowry. Number one, it's a way to support the family because they're losing someone who can work and who can do things. But number two, it also proves to the father that you can take care of his daughter. So they'll have to raise a few thousand kwacha, which to us is nothing, but to them it's prohibitive.
And Fidelis had to do the same thing before he married Christine, was to get that dowry together.
Did you see any of those people that were here?
No, we were in a different region. But one thing I will note is I was talking to them about our benevolence ministry. I was talking to Bitwell about it and how we cook these big, amazing meals when families lose someone. He said it's the opposite here. I said, what do you mean? He said, when your family member dies, let's say your spouse dies, you are expected to host the entire family for several weeks and feed them every meal and pay for all of their transportation. So he said when someone dies, it's a huge burden on the family. And I'm like, why? But it's their culture. I mean, you know, it's thousands
So
of
they
years.
may not bury them right away.
Yeah.
You know, they may not have the funeral right away because they've got to raise this money for the funeral. And they don't embalm either.
I think they would go ahead and inter them, but they would wait to do a service. That's what I'm hoping. Yeah. No. Yes.
Their water supply is very
the Zambezi, which I have a picture of here in a minute. That's the major river that goes all the way through, and that's where most of their water supply is going to come from. I did see a sewage treatment plant, and that was kind of interesting because you're going by and it's dry, brown, big pools of water. And I looked at Bitwell and I goes, what is that? And he goes, oh, that's our water treatment. And I was like, oh, okay, that looks just like it does in the States. But yeah, it's very dry. The plants are amazing there. The baobab tree, I can't remember, it swells during the rainy season to store water. And then it contracts during the dry season. And so it's just amazing. Here, let's move on a little bit, and then let me share a couple comments. Well, let me just say, my favorite memory, and I've got a picture of it here in a minute, which you can't really tell that well, was the stars. I was a biology major for a reason. I enjoyed biology, but I just enjoy nature. I enjoy studying. I enjoy learning about things. And so I'm standing in the middle of New Jerusalem. Everybody's over there. I kind of wandered off by myself, and they're watching the Jesus film. And I'm just staring at the stars. The little kids probably thought, oh, there's that crazy Mzungu. But I'm just staring, because most of the trees are, 20 feet or shorter. So you can see stars 360. Like, just over the horizon, you can see stars all the way around you. And I remember when I was a kid, they say, can't you see the Milky Way? And you can see the faint outline. No. It's like a road going right across the sky. I'm looking, and it's like, whoa, there's a constellation, and there's another one, all these things that we can't see. And I got very emotional at the passage that came to my head. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out throughout the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has set a tent for the sun. God has given us this incredible creation, and he's given us this beautiful opportunity to share the gospel with people. And I work that into all my sermons. Psalm 19, verses 1 specifically, the heavens declare his handiwork. And I would tell people, you are so blessed where you live. This is such a beautiful country. This is such an incredible... And I would tell them I could see the stars, and they're like, you can't see stars back home? I'm like, I can see them, but not like this. And so just to explain to them, like, yeah, in America, we have more money, but that doesn't make life better. I would much rather have a society that respects and values the life of children. I would much rather have a society that cares about nature. And so it was a very cool experience for me. The eyeglasses, watching the joy on people's faces, and then just looking up and seeing God's beautiful handiwork. Those are cool things for me that I experienced. I want to share a little bit of the end of our trip very quickly. We're not going to spend long on this. Most mission trips, most long-term mission trips, long-term meaning more than a week, end with something fun. And so the fun thing we did was we drove back to the Livingstone in the south of the country, which I'm not going to show you on the map again, but it's right down there at the bottom. And we went, this is the tent that I told you I got to stay in a tent. That's the tent I got to stay in. It was originally Carolyn's. We so graciously swapped. This is the inside of the tent, though. So, it wasn't as bad as I may have led you to believe. There is actually, the funny thing was, there's a solid wall on the back of the tent, and there's an air conditioner. I never turned it on. I just the weather was perfect. I never needed it. There is a mosquito net. There were mosquitoes at this place, and they did have to put that down every night. This is the view out of our compound. I mean, it's just everywhere you look. Oh, and you can't tell here, but there's an embankment right there. And it's got footprints all over it. And I looked at the lady and I said, what are those footprints from? She said, oh, there's a hippo that comes out every morning. We were always gone by the time the hippo came out, but that's just cool. We heard chimpanzees yelling and screaming all night. That was fun. This is Carolyn and I going over into Zimbabwe, over the Zambezi, right past Victoria Falls. This is also where Carolyn saw people bungee jumping, and my wife specifically said, you cannot go bungee jumping. Carolyn takes a picture of a random guy bungee jumping, sends it to my wife, and says he did it anyway. In the middle of teaching, I looked at her and I said, you did, please tell my wife you were kidding. She goes, okay, I'll tell her. All right. That's me going into Zimbabwe. You don't care about that. There's Victoria Falls. The drought is so severe that Victoria Falls is like 20% of what it normally is.
So we did not get the full effect. So yes, at some point I will need to go back and see the full thing, but it's still gorgeous. I mean, it was just, these pictures are on my cell phone. Can you imagine if I had a real phone? This is just me and Bitwill. He wanted to take this goofy picture, so he took it. Bottom of Victoria Falls. This is Carolyn hiding behind John because a warthog came across our path. That's ostrich, by the way. It's ostrich and crocodile bites. That was my lunch in Zimbabwe. It was awesome. Well, the next day we went on a water safari. Saw crocodiles, what's that thing? That was Cape Buffalo. There you go. There's an impala. He did not care at all that we were there. He was watching the water. And anytime there was a bubble, he would jump and run away. And then right on the other side of the boat, there's all these elephants. That was a cool our captain in the boat and our driver in the truck just kept getting closer and closer. And I'm sitting there going, stop, 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 stop. We're close enough. I'm good. Then we got on the truck and did a little bit of land safari, giraffes. It took about 30 minutes. I hadn't seen a giraffe. I was really disappointed because Emma wanted to see a giraffe. Well, next thing you know, there's a giraffe on every corner. I'm like, enough with the giraffes. I need something else. There's a lot of giraffes. There's lions. And we're right beside them. He pulled up and I'm like, this isn't smart. I'm going to take some pictures. Yeah. One of them got up and I'm like, this is it. This is how Aaron dies. It stretched like your house cat, laid back down, and I was like, we're good. The whole time my driver, he had gone off-road to find these lions, and he goes, I could lose my license for this. And I'm like, you just want a bigger tip. Kudu, really pretty animal. This isn't the best picture, but they're really pretty animals. Zebra, this was really cool. There's a husband and wife trying to walk across. There's a bridge. There's a little suspension bridge. And she wasn't going. And her husband's standing in the middle of the bridge like, and Carolyn comes up, and I don't know if the lady spoke English or not. Did she speak English? Okay, she spoke a little bit of English. And Carolyn's like, I'm scared too. Can I go with you? They linked arms, and Carolyn got this lady across the bridge. That was just a really cool memory. This is Carolyn and I in the Zambezi. We didn't go a lot deeper than this because there are animals, you know. There were people on either side. I figured they'd get eaten first. But we walked out as far as we would dare and then got in the water. We wanted to say we had been in, we could tell people we swam in the Zambezi. Swimming. This was priceless. One of the ladies, her name is Susan. I don't think Susan's a real big wildlife kind of person. She is getting in the van, and I'm driving, and we're stopped. We're at a parking lot for the Victoria Falls, and I look over her head, and this monkey is literally right there, this chimpanzee. He's just looking at her, and I said, Susan, look behind you, and she goes, ah, ah, ah. He was big. I tried to play this video tonight. It wouldn't work. This is 60 yards from my tent. I got back, and one of the guides is like, you all need to get into your cabins quickly. And I'm like, dude, what is a tent gonna do? What are you talking about? And he goes, the elephant, if he sees you, he may charge. And I'm like, point taken. I'm still not going in my tent. I held the door open and watched. But this elephant was coming up into the camp, and they can't have that. They don't care if they walk around it, but they can't come in. Because the first night we got there, some elephants went through and tore up some lights, knocked down some trees right in the middle of the camp. And so they do a lot of damage very quickly. They're not trying to tear things up. They're just gigantic. Well, there was a tree, and he was going up to the tree, the one right here in front of him, which is a big tree. You can't really tell in this, but that's a giant tree. It's about that big around. He is walking up to it, putting his head against it, and shaking the tree. I mean, just like it's a toothpick. And there's fruit at the top of the tree that's falling down, and he's eating the fruit. So these guys, these poor guys at the compound are going out there banging trash can lids, trying to scare him away. They're bringing out big trash cans and slamming the lids, trying to scare this elephant away. And he could not care less. And Bitwill told me, when an elephant is eating, you might as well just forget about it. You got to wait for him to finish, and then you can scare them away. But they did eventually scare the elephant away. I survived. I did not get squished. But that was a cool experience. Can you see that? Yeah, I mean, it's my cell phone. Like, if you try to take a cell phone out in your front yard tonight, try it and see what kind of picture. That's how dark it was where we were, that my cell phone could pick up a picture like that. No, it does not. This is at Livingstone. So this is in the more touristy area by Victoria Falls. I didn't have that 360-degree panoramic of the sky. This view, and I think somebody made a joke about this the other night. I told you the shower in our cabins was open to the sky. This is the view out the shower. So I know it's weird, but I'm bathing, and right here, you can't see it right now, it's low on the horizon, is the Southern Cross. You can't see the Southern Cross unless you're in the Southern Hemisphere. It's just a neat experience. And there's bats flying overhead squeaking, and Susan and Jan weren't fans of that, but I thought it was really neat. Let's see, I think I go back to video after this. I do. So overall, it was an incredible trip. I want to take each and every one of you with me. In fact, I texted some of you while I was there and said, you're coming with me next time. And I mean that. The flight there was not bad at all. The flight home, I'm not going to lie, it was long. It was 3 hours in the first airport, 2 hours on a plane, 6 hours in the next airport, 16 hours on a plane, 3 hours in a bus, and an hour on the way home with Mark, although that was a good part. I didn't mind being with Mark. So it was 30 hours to get home. That was a long time, but y'all, it was totally worth it. To me, hang on one second, if we left behind a few embers that can do anything for the gospel in Zambia, and I know they can, oh man, it's so worth it. I'd get on another 30-hour flight. Maybe not tomorrow, but I'd do it again. And people say, well, the trip's so expensive. The trip is expensive because of airfare. The trip is it was $4,300 or something for our trip. $2,300 of that was just airfare. And then it's $2,000 for 2 weeks in country, including going to Victoria Falls. And that included all our food. We didn't have to pay for anything. We did because I wanted to try all the snack food and all the junk food. I wanted to try all the local stuff. So I'm spending beyond that, but all of our meals were included. So it really was not a bad trip. What was your question?
I was just wondering for you and for Carolyn, because you didn't have like day-to-day distractions and you were so off the grid, like, was it a lot easier to find time to, like, did you feel closer to God, like being so not distracted? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I'll answer for myself, and maybe Carolyn wants to answer for herself. My closeness with God is generally not affected by being out in nature or anything like. My closeness with God is based on my obedience to Him. And so I have found that if I am living in light of God's will for that day and for that moment and for that time, I feel content with where I'm supposed to be. It's when I'm living in disobedience that I feel distant from Him. Did I feel more close to Him on the mission trip? Maybe, just because I know 100% sure that's what I'm supposed to be doing. But on the other hand, I really missed my family. I really missed my wife. I really missed my children. And so that's a burden that I don't have here because I'm with them all the time. So it's different. I was energized. I had more energy when I woke up in the morning than I do here. Because I was just, stop it. I was ready to go. Whatever we were doing, I was excited about it. And the other thing I told Catherine was, I didn't have to make any decisions. I just get in the bus and go, where are we going? Like, all I did was drive, and they would tell me where to go. And in some ways, that was a really just much needed rest and break for my mind. So, do you want to add anything?
To answer her question, to answer your question from my point of view is, I wouldn't say I felt closer to God, but I felt more focused to have that